Hi folks, welcome. I'm really glad you're here. Go ahead and get comfortable now. Maybe you're lying down. Maybe you're sitting somewhere quiet. Wherever you are, just take a deep breath and let the day slowly fade away. Tonight, we'll be telling a story, a very old one. A story that has been passed down through many, many years, from voice to voice, from heart to heart. This one is about a flame. Not just any flame, but the first flame. You see, in the beginning, people had no fire. There was no warm light at night, no way to cook their food, no glowing ember to gather around. The nights were long, cold, and very dark. But then, something changed. Someone, not a man, not quite a god either, gave fire to humans. His name was Prometheus. Now, before we begin, let's pause for just a moment, because this story, like many old stories, is a myth. And myths aren't always facts. They're not history books. They aren't science or proof, but they carry something special. They carry feelings and meanings, and questions we still ask, even today. You might think of a myth as a kind of echo. Not a loud one, but soft. Like a voice calling from far away, telling us something we don't want to forget. And the story of Prometheus, well, it's one of those echoes. Why do we still tell it? Why has it stayed with us for thousands of years? Maybe because it's not just a tale about fire. It's about kindness and courage, and how sometimes doing what's right comes with a price. And maybe it also reminds us of what fire really meant to people long ago. To them, fire wasn't just warm. It was hope. It meant they could survive the winter. It meant they could see each other's faces after the sun went down. It meant food could be shared, and stories could be told. Fire was life. It was magic. It was a little piece of the stars resting in their hands. And that's where our story begins. Not with thunder, not with war, but with a quiet world waiting for its first flame. Now, let's imagine a time long, long ago, before cities, before temples, before gods ruled from high mountain thrones, a time when humans were still very new. The ancient Greeks believed that the first humans were not strong or clever. Not yet, anyway. They were soft, bare, and very small in the wide, wide world around them. The earth was wild back then. Mountains stood like giants, forests stretched forever, and the sky was always watching. But the people, they were quiet. They didn't have fire to warm their bodies, no shelter from cold winds, no cooked meals, just roots and fruits and whatever else they could chew raw. They huddled together when the air turned cold. They shivered when night came, and they couldn't keep the darkness away. Imagine sitting under the stars, with no light but the moon, no heat for your hands, no glow to push back the shadows. The animals had fur, the birds had nests, even the wolves had sharp teeth and speed. But humans, they had nothing. They were slow on their feet, they didn't have claws, their skin tore easily. And when the winter came, many of them didn't make it through. To the gods, humans must have looked like flickering candles, frail, dim, always close to going out. And yet, something in them kept going. They gathered. They helped each other. They looked up at the stars with wide, wondering eyes and hoped for something more. But still, there was no fire, no warmth, no way to cook the bitter things, no safety from the beasts that moved in the dark. The first humans in Greek myth lived in this quiet kind of struggle. Not loud, Not fast, just slow days of surviving, and cold, silent nights. And it's in this lonely world, this waiting world, that our story begins to stir. The world the first humans lived in was not like the one we know today. It was wild, untamed, and full of deep, quiet power. The trees grew tall and close together, so thick they sometimes blocked the sunlight. The forest floor was cold and wet, with strange roots and hidden holes. Animals moved softly between the leaves, some small and harmless, others not. There were no roads, no houses, no fences. Just earth and sky, and all the things in between. The rivers rushed fast, sometimes helpful, sometimes not. If the water was kind, it gave fish to eat and coolness to drink. But when it turned angry, it could rise up, wash away homes made of sticks, and leave nothing behind. And the weather, well, it had a mind of its own. The rain didn't come when asked. It fell when it wanted, and if it didn't come for too long, the ground dried up, the plants died, and people went hungry. Thunder made the sky groan, winds howled through empty valleys, and when the snow came, there was no warning, just cold, deep and biting. The night was the hardest part. Without fire, the dark was total. It filled every corner. You could not see your hand, or the eyes that might be watching from the trees. And in the dark, there were dangers. Wolves hunted in silence. Bears stirred in the black woods. And people had no walls, no fire scare the beasts away. So they huddled together. They prayed to the stars. They listened to the wind and hoped it would pass them by. Everything they needed, food, water, shelter, came from nature. But nature did not promise to be kind. Sometimes it gave, and sometimes it took. The people lived not with power, but with patience, waiting for rain, waiting for sun, waiting for safety in a world that didn't promise it. They were like little seeds in a huge, wild field, trying to grow, trying to live, trying to survive in a world that had all the strength and none of the mercy. Now, let's close our eyes for a moment and try to feel what life was really like in a world without fire. The morning would come slowly, as soft light touched the tops of the trees. You might wake on the hard earth, your body curled tight against the cold. The air would smell like wet leaves, old soil, and the breath of sleeping animals. Your hands would be stiff, your feet damp with dew. And already the day would feel long. To eat, there were no ovens, no pots, no warmth. You'd dig up roots with your fingers, or use a rough stone to pry them loose. You'd eat them raw, tough and bitter in your mouth. Maybe you'd chew on old berries. Maybe you'd share a piece of raw fish if someone caught one in the stream. No seasonings, no warmth, just cold food in a cold world. And for tools, there were only stones, nothing sharp from metal. No fire to shape or melt, just hard rocks, struck against harder rocks until they cracked the right way. A flat stone could crush seeds. A sharp one could cut bark or fur, but they wore out fast, and your hands would bleed from using them. You might carry a little pouch of bones or teeth, not for fashion, but because they were useful. A tooth might poke a hole in something. A sharp bone might scrape bark. All around you, the forest whispered. Birds called in the trees. Insects buzzed near your ear. And always, always, there were the footsteps of things you couldn't see. You'd learn to listen closely, to every snap of a twig, to every sudden silence, because danger often came quietly. At night, Fear would settle in your chest like a stone. You'd sit close to the others, your eyes wide, watching the dark. There was no way to push it back, no glowing light to hold in your hand. Only the stars far above, and the quiet breathing of those beside you. Every sound could mean danger. A rustle, a growl, a crack in the woods. You'd hold your breath and wait. This was life before fire. Slow, raw, and always just a little bit afraid. While humans lived in cold and shadow, up on the mountain, things were very different. High above the earth, above the clouds, stood a place called Olympus. It wasn't cold there. It wasn't wild, and it was never dark. Because Olympus was home to the gods, and the gods, they had fire. Not just any fire, but living flame. Fire that danced without fading. Fire that answered to their will. Bright, endless, sacred. The gods didn't need to struggle to survive. They didn't wait for the sun to rise. They didn't shiver at night, or eat food raw and cold. They had warmth whenever they wanted. They had feasts with roasted meats and glowing torches. They lit their halls with golden flames, held in bowls that never burned away. And they cooked with it, shaped metal with it, and used it to shine in their power. To the gods, fire was not just useful. It was a mark of their greatness, a symbol of who they were. It was one of the things that made them gods, and it was not meant for mortals. They kept fire to themselves, tucked away in the heavens, out of reach, out of sight. Down below, humans crouched in the dark, but up on Olympus, the halls glowed with golden warmth. Fire was a secret, a gift only the gods were allowed to touch. To share it, to even think of giving it away, was unthinkable. Because in the eyes of Zeus and all who ruled with him, fire was not something to be given, but something to be guarded. It was a boundary, a line between gods and mortals, and it would stay that way, or so they believed. Even though the gods lived far above the earth, they were always watching. They looked down and saw humans, small, struggling, cold. But they did not feel pity. Zeus, king of the gods, was not known for kindness. He ruled with thunder in his voice and law in his hand. And to him, fire was not just a tool, it was power. And power was not to be shared. Zeus believed mortals should stay in their place. They were not meant to be too comfortable, or too clever, or too strong. If they had fire, they might grow bold, they might dream bigger, they might begin to question the gods themselves. And so, he kept it from them. Not by accident, but on purpose. He guarded the flame, just as he guarded the sky. He locked it away in the heavens, wrapped in cloud and lightning, safe from human hands. And down below, humans continued to live in the cold, in the dark, with only their hopes and their hand. It was a kind of control, quiet, but deep. And for a long time, no one dared to challenge it. But now, as we sit together in the stillness, we can take a gentle pause and ask a quiet question. Was it fear? Was it pride? Or simply a desire to keep the world in its place? Maybe Zeus believed that without struggle, people would forget their limits. Maybe he thought that by keeping fire from them, he was keeping the balance of the world. Or maybe he simply couldn't imagine sharing power with those who weren't like him. Whatever the reason, the choice was clear. The flame stayed on Olympus, and the world below remained cold. But not forever. Because someone was watching too. A god who walked differently. A god who looked of humans and saw something more. Before there were Olympians, before Zeus threw his thunderbolts, before the sky and the sea had names, there were the Titans. Not quite gods as we know them now, and not quite like mortals either. They were older, quieter, stronger, in ways that didn't always show. They were born from the union of earth and sky, Gaia and Uranus. From that first joining came a great family, thick with names and stories, like roots spreading beneath a forest. There were 12 titans, and each one held something vast within them. There was Oceanus, who wrapped around the world like a river with no end. There was Hyperion, who carried the light of the sun. Thea, his sister, who shimmered with the glow of sight. Mnemosyne, the keeper of memory. Rhea, who would one day be the mother of Zeus. Kronos, sharp and watchful, who would take the sky's throne. And among them was Ipetus. He didn't rule the heavens or hold the storms, but from him came something different, a quieter kind of strength. Ipetus had sons, 4 of them, each one different, each one important. There was Atlas, who would one day carry the sky on his shoulders. There was Epimetheus, who acted first and thought later. There was Menetius, fiery and proud, who burned too brightly. And then there was Prometheus. Not the strongest, not the loudest, but thoughtful, gentle-eyed, always watching. In a world of thunder and flame, Prometheus was the quiet flame. A titan who listened. A titan who noticed things. While others roared, he wondered. While others fought, he imagined. And as time passed, he began to notice something very small and very strange. Down below, on the cold earth, there were these fragile little creatures with curious hands and hungry eyes. And for some reason, he couldn't stop thinking about them. Names, in ancient stories, are more than just sounds. They hold meaning. They carry the shape of who someone is even before they act. The name Prometheus comes from an old word, one that means forethought. It's a quiet word, but a strong one. It means he thinks ahead. He sees the path before others do. He doesn't rush, he waits. He watches, and he plans. While other gods and titans might leap into battle or follow their anger, Prometheus listens to the silence first. He notices small things that others miss. A child shivering in the cold, a spark in the wind, the way a bird cracks a nut on a stone. And from those little moments, he begins to imagine more. Forethought doesn't mean he's always right. It doesn't mean he knows everything, but it means he tries. He tries to understand what might happen next, and what others might need even before they know it themselves. It's a name of care, of patience, of quiet wisdom, and that's what made Prometheus different. In a world of gods who wanted worship, who wanted thunder, who wanted power, he wanted something else. He wanted to help, not for praise, not for a throne, but because he saw what others could become if someone just gave them a little more warmth, a little more light, a little more hope. Prometheus had a brother. His name was Epimetheus. The name means something different. It means afterthought. While Prometheus would think ahead, Epimetheus would think afterward. After the choice was made. After the step was taken. He wasn't unkind. He wasn't foolish in a cruel way. He just didn't wait. Where Prometheus would pause, Epimetheus would act. Where Prometheus saw danger, Epimetheus saw adventure. You could say they were opposites, but not enemies. Just different ways of looking at the world. Imagine 2 boys standing at the edge of a river. One is already splashing in, laughing, feeling the water, the mud, not thinking of what might happen next. That's Epimetheus. The other stands still, watching the current, noticing where the rocks are, thinking about how deep it goes. That's Prometheus. In the old stories, these 2 brothers often appear side by side. like two sides of the same coin, one rushing into life, the other quietly watching from behind. And when the world was young, when humans were still new, still cold, still lost, the difference between them would become very important. Because when the gods gave out gifts to all the living creatures, Prometheus was the one in charge. And he didn't wait for Prometheus. He handed out wings to birds, fur to animals, claws to predators, shells to turtles. Every creature got something. But by the time he reached humans, he had run out. No fur, no claws, no wings, no strength. Just bare skin, soft hands, and wondering eyes. It wasn't meant to be cruel. It was just afterthought. And when Prometheus arrived, he saw what had happened. He looked at the humans standing naked in the cold, and something inside him stirred. They didn't have claws, but they had hands. They didn't have wings, but they looked up at the sky. And maybe, just maybe, they needed a different kind of gift. Not something from the earth, but something from the gods. And Prometheus was already beginning to think. There is an old telling of the tale where Prometheus is more than a helper, more than just a giver of fire. In this version, he is a maker, a quiet creator. They say he walked beside the rivers of the earth when the world was still young. And in the soft, wet clay by the water's edge, he knelt down and began to shape something with his hands. Not quickly, not carelessly, but slowly, as someone might mold a memory. He took his time. The clay was warm from the sun, smooth, cool in the shadows, and Prometheus, gentle in his thoughts, pressed it carefully into form. A face, two hands, a chest that could breathe, legs made for walking, for exploring, for dancing, maybe, one day. And then, the eyes. Eyes shaped not just to see, but to wonder. When he was done, he stepped back and looked at what he had made. A shape like the gods, but softer, fragile, curious. Some say Athena, the goddess of wisdom, came down to bless the figure, to breathe into it the first breath of life. Others say it stirred because Prometheus had filled it with his own longing, his own quiet hope that this new creature might rise one day and learn to build, to love, to dream. It's a gentle story, one full of warmth, because if this version is true, then Prometheus did not just care for humans. He made them. And when you make something, when you shape it with your own hands, you do not forget it. You feel responsible. You want to protect it. You want it to thrive. That, perhaps, is where the story truly begins. Not with fire, but with love. In many stories of old gods and titans, you'll hear of rage, thunder, and shouting across the skies. But Prometheus was not like that. He did not roar. He did not command storms. He didn't shake mountains when he walked. Prometheus was quiet. Not weak, but still. He watched. He thought. He listened. When others argued loudly on Olympus, he stood at the edge, not to avoid the noise, but to think more clearly. He didn't rush his words, and when he spoke, he chose his tone with care, like someone carrying something delicate in both hands. You could say he felt more than the other gods, not in the way of sorrow, but in the way of noticing. He saw small things, a trembling hand, a hungry child, a face tilted toward the sky with no answer coming back. And when he looked at mortals, so raw, so cold, trying to survive in a world not made for them, he didn't laugh, he didn't scorn, he cared. That kind of care doesn't come from pride. It doesn't come from power. It comes from sympathy. A quiet ache inside the heart when we see someone struggling and we wish we could help. That was Prometheus. Not the strongest among the titans, not the most praised among the gods, but perhaps the most human. And maybe that's why his story lingers in the soft corners of myth. Because while others conquered, or punished, or demanded worship, Prometheus watched. He waited. He thought. And he chose to help. Prometheus lived in a quiet space between worlds. He was a titan by birth, a being from an older generation of gods, strong and ancient. But he also lived among the Olympians, the younger gods who had taken power after the titans. He did not fully belong to either side. Not quite a rebel, not quite a servant. He watched both. He understood both. The titans were proud, fierce, and sometimes stubborn. The Olympians were clever, powerful, and often demanding. But Prometheus, he was something different. He did not follow blindly, he did not fight for the sake of fighting. Instead, he chose what he believed was right. And that was a lonely path. Because standing between two worlds means not always being understood, sometimes feeling apart. He cared deeply for mortals, for their struggles, their hopes, their quiet lives. And that care placed him in a delicate balance, between old power and new authority, between strength and compassion. It was a position filled with responsibility, one that requires courage, not the loud kind, but the steady, quiet kind. To watch over those who have less power, to protect the fragile, to give when others might refuse. What does it mean to feel responsible for those beneath you? To see the world from above, yet care enough to reach down. It is a question that stretches beyond myths, beyond gods and mortals. It touches the heart of what it means to be a guardian, a thinker, and a friend. And in that space between titans and Olympians, between power and kindness, Prometheus quietly waits, ready to light a flame that could change everything. There was a time, long ago, when the world was still young, and the bond between gods and humans was not yet formed. There was a day, a quiet but important day, in a small place called Mechany. Something important happened. The gods and the humans had gathered, not to fight, not to shout, but to decide something simple, yet lasting. The gods were going to choose something very important. How gifts and offerings would be shared between humans and the gods. In simpler words, when people made sacrifices, what part would go to the gods and what part would be left for people to keep. It was a moment that would shape the future, and Prometheus was there. He had been watching the people. He had seen their hunger, their hard work, their need. And now, he had a chance to do something, to give them just a little more. So at Mechany, he stepped forward, calmly, quietly, and he made two piles. One looked beautiful. It was wrapped in smooth fat, soft and white like melted snow. It looked rich. It looked like a gift fit for the gods. But underneath were bones. Just dry, empty bones. The second pile was not pretty. It was wrapped in rough hide, tough skin that looked dull and brown. It did not shine. It did not please the eye. But under the skin was real meat. Warm, rich, full of life. Food that could nourish a person through cold days and long nights. Prometheus turned to Zeus, king of the gods, and asked him to choose which offering would be for the gods. It was a small trick, a gentle trick, one done not out of pride nor anger, but out of care. Zeus looked at the two piles. He saw the shiny fat. He saw the dull scraps. And he chose the shining pile, the one that looked grand, the one with fat on the outside and bones on the inside. And from that day on, the gods would receive the smoke and fat of sacrifices, while humans would keep the meat. It may not seem like much, but it meant everything. Prometheus had not fooled Zeus to embarrass him. He had done it so that people wouldn't go hungry after a sacrifice. They could feed their families. They could survive a little better. It was a soft act of kindness, done in silence. Prometheus had given humans more than meat that day. He had given them dignity. He had said, with no words, "You deserve to eat. You matter." But even gentle tricks can stir anger in high places. And Zeus, though he said little in that moment, he did not forget, because even kings don't always like being outsmarted. Zeus did not shout. He did not strike lightning from the sky. He did not shake the earth. Not yet. When he looked at the pile of shining fat and saw only brittle bones beneath it, his face did not twist in anger. His voice did not thunder across the hills. He was quiet. But quiet does not always mean calm. Sometimes, the loudest storms begin in silence. And Zeus, though he spoke no harsh words, began to carry a weight in his heart. It wasn't just about the bones. It wasn't only the trick. It was that he, the king of all gods, had been made to look foolish, in front of the mortals, in front of his fellow immortals. Prometheus had not shouted, had not laughed, had not gloated. But Zeus still felt something sharp, not on his skin, but deep, deep inside. It was a different kind of fire, not the fire that warms, not the fire that cooks food or lights a home, but a fire of pride. And pride, once wounded, burns in its own way. So Zeus watched and waited. He did not punish Prometheus right away. He said nothing that day. No bolts, no banishment, no roaring voice from above. But from that moment forward, a seed had been planted in his mind, a seed of displeasure. And as we will soon see, that quiet seed would grow, not quickly, not loudly, but steadily. Because even in myths, the strongest anger is not always the loudest, and the most dangerous punishments often begin in silence. When we think of sacrifice today, we may think of giving something up, letting go of something we love for someone or something greater. But long ago, sacrifice meant something more. It was a way to speak to the gods, a quiet language made of fire, smoke, and offering. To give an animal, to burn a piece of it on the altar, was not just to lose it. It was to share it, to say, "Here, take this. I honor you. I remember you." But in Mythology, the idea of sacrifice changed, because Prometheus changed the shape of the gift. He made it into a question. He showed that a gift could be made to look more than it was, that something beautiful on the outside might be empty on the inside. Was it a trick? Yes, but it was also a lesson. And this brings us to a quiet thought. What is deception? Is it always cruel? Is it always wrong? Or can it sometimes protect? Can it sometimes guide? Prometheus wrapped bones in shining fat. He made the worthless look worthy. He made Zeus choose what looked good, so that people, simple and hungry, could keep what they truly needed. So, was that trick a lie or a gift? Did Prometheus do it to shame Zeus or to care for humans? Maybe it was both. Maybe in that soft moment at Mythology, he was not just a trickster, but also a quiet protector. Maybe he saw how fragile humans were, how cold, how small, how much they needed even a little help. And maybe he also knew that gods, even mighty ones, sometimes need to be reminded. Power is not always in thunder. Sometimes it is in thought, and sometimes in kindness. So we are left with a question. Did Prometheus truly stand against Zeus? Or did he simply stand beside the humans, those slow, careful creatures of clay who had no fire, but who still hoped? When Zeus saw what Prometheus had done at Mycone, how the gods had been offered only bones, and how mortals were left with all the meat, his silence was heavy. Not angry in a loud, shouting way, but deep, like clouds gathering on a distant hill. He didn't roar, he didn't strike. Instead, he made a decision, one that would change everything. He looked down at the humans, those clay-born creatures, small and uncertain, shivering in the wind, eating their food raw, living in the dark. And then, he turned his gaze away. He said, "They shall have no fire. No warmth in the cold, no light when night comes, no flame to cook food, to forge tools, to keep the wild things away." Zeus took it not with thunder, but with quiet refusal. It was a denial, a locking of doors, not a loud punishment, but a distant one, as if to say, if they side with Prometheus, then let them learn what life is without my gifts. And so, fire remained on Olympus, a divine thing, a treasure kept high above where no mortal hand could reach it. On earth there was only cold and silence. Fires that once burned in the forests after lightning strikes were left to die out. No one dared approach them. They were fleeting visitors, gone as quickly as they came. The night grew longer, the wind sharper. Humans, who had only just begun to stand upright, to make tools, to think in new ways, were now made to wait, to wonder, to survive without the one thing that could have helped them the most. And high above, the gods watched. All except one. And so the fire was gone. It didn't vanish in a flash. There was no storm. No god came down with a warning. It was simply missing. One day, the last ember went out, and no one could bring it back. People tried, rubbing stones, blowing on dry leaves, hoping something might spark, but nothing did. And slowly, the warmth faded. Nights grew longer and colder. Children curled up beside their mothers, shaking from the chill. Fathers stood at cave mouths watching the stars, but seeing no light close enough to help. There was no firelight to dance on the walls, no glow to hold back the shadows. The animals came closer. Wolves with yellow eyes, bears that roamed freely. There was no flame to scare them. Even the food, already hard to chew, hard to keep, was now worse. Raw roots, cold meat, no warmth in the belly, no comfort after a long day. People began to whisper. Not words, but quiet sounds, soft fears shared in the dark. Will the sun come back? Why is the world so cold now? Did we do something wrong? No one knew the answers, but they all felt the same thing, a sense of being alone. Not just without fire, but without hope, without protection, without the gods. They looked up, but the sky said nothing. And in this long pause, this stretch of cold and dark, something began to grow. Not anger, not rebellion, but longing. A deep, aching wish for warmth, for light, for something to return to them, something that made life feel full again. And far off, in the quiet corners of the world, Prometheus was watching. High in the quiet edges of the world, where the clouds drift slowly and time seems softer, Prometheus watched. He did not speak, he did not rush. He simply observed. Below him the world had dimmed. The small lights of human hope, once flickering, now fading. Caves that once glowed with warmth were now cold hollows. Villages silent, fires gone, and he saw it all. Children curled tight in sleep, shivering without warmth. Mothers trying to shield their babies from the cold, using only their own bodies. Old men coughing in the night, their bones aching with each breath of winter air. He saw their food, bare, hard, untouched. He saw fear in their eyes, not of beasts, but of the dark itself. Prometheus did not turn away. There was a quiet ache in his chest, not loud, not dramatic, just steady. A kind of pain only felt by those who cared deeply. He remembered what it had been like before. The laughter, the dancing shadows on stone walls, the way fire had brought people close, had made the world feel less vast, less frightening. And now they were alone. Still alive, yes, but only just. Prometheus understood what Zeus had done. He understood the rules, the boundaries, but he also knew something else, something that gods often forget, that humans are not just creatures. They are dreamers, makers, beings who look at the stars and wonder. He watched as they tried, again and again, to bring the fire back. Stones clacked, sticks rubbed, eyes searched the skies, and still, nothing. He did not yet move, but the thought, the question, was already there, quietly taking shape. Could he let this continue? Should a god stay still when the world below is freezing? He remained in his quiet place, but his heart was no longer still. Prometheus stayed still, but inside he felt heavy. Not the kind of heavy you feel in your arms or your legs. It was a quiet, deeper weight, a feeling that sat in his chest and would not go away. He kept watching. He watched the people try to smile, try to laugh, try to hold on. But there was sadness in their faces now, a tired sadness, a quiet giving up. Prometheus knew what it was. It was not just the cold. It was the feeling of being forgotten, and that was the hardest part. Not the dark, not the hunger, but the silence from the sky. They had no words for it, but he saw it in their eyes. Does anyone care? He did. He was not like the others on Olympus. He did not enjoy watching mortals struggle. He did not smile when they stumbled. He felt every moment of their pain as if it were his own. And that was the weight, because he could help. He knew he could. In one quiet moment, with one small spark, he could bring fire back to their world. But to do that, he would have to break the rule. Not just any rule, Zeus's rule. The king of the gods had spoken, and when Zeus spoke, even the skies listened. Still, Prometheus looked down again. At a child holding her frozen hands to her face, at a man praying to nothing, whispering into the cold wind. And he felt it. Not pride, not anger, but love. A soft, human love. The kind that does not need a reason. The kind that simply is. That's when the question came. Not loud, not urgent, just there. Simple. If I can help, and I don't, who am I? It was not rebellion, not yet, but something deeper, something older. Compassion. A love that bends the rules not to hurt, but to heal. And in that quiet moment, a choice began to grow. A small flame, not yet lit, but waiting. Waiting for the one who would choose to care, even when it cost everything. Sometimes, breaking a rule is not about pride, but about love. Sometimes defiance is not war, but kindness. And sometimes, the greatest strength is not in saying no, but in whispering yes to someone else's pain. And so, Prometheus decided to steal the hidden flame, and return it to man. It did not begin with lightning, not with a roar or a shout or a war cry. No armies, no storms, no drama. Just one God, one thought, one hand, and fire, waiting in silence. On Olympus, the fire burned brightly. Inside the hearths of the gods, in the forges of Hephaestus, in the rituals only immortals could touch. It was not just heat, it was a secret, sacred, guarded. But Prometheus moved like a shadow, not to steal for power, not to boast. He moved like someone carrying a sleeping child, carefully, quietly, gently. Some say he used a fennel stalk, a long, hollow plant, perfect for hiding a small, glowing coal. A secret ember, tucked inside a green stem, held close against the wind. Others say it was a torch, lit from Hephaestus's forge when no one was watching. Some say he reached into the very sun and plucked a sliver of its light. But it does not matter which tale is true. What matters is this. He did it. Not for glory, not to be a hero, but because someone had to. And when he turned away from the sacred flame, carrying that ember down from the sky, he did not smile. He did not shout. He simply walked. One quiet figure, holding the first light of human hope in his hands. Not thunder, not lightning, but a spark. And from that spark, a world would change forever. The fennel stalk is not just a plant. To most, it's thin, simple, maybe even forgettable. But in the old stories, it becomes something more. A vessel, a keeper of warmth, a quiet rebel. It burns differently from dry wood. It doesn't flare up fast or crackle with noise. Instead, it holds heat deep inside, a gentle ember, protected by green flesh, slow to burn, slow to fade. This mattered, because Prometheus did not want a fire that would draw eyes. He wanted a flame that would last, long enough to carry it down the mountain, long enough to reach the people below, long enough to begin again. In this way, the fennel stalk is more than a tool. It is a symbol of care, of patience, of the slow, steady gift of knowledge. Fire could have come as a strike of lightning. It could have come as explosion, as violence. But it didn't. It came hidden, wrapped in something soft, something green, something fragile. And maybe that's the point. Some of the most powerful things do not arrive loudly. They come quietly, hidden in humble forms, meant not to destroy, but to grow. The fennel stalk, in its quiet way, reminds us it is not always the biggest spark that changes the world. Sometimes it is the one that burns slow and keeps burning. There were no trumpets, no wind shaking the trees, no thunder rolling across the hills, just quiet steps, one after another. Prometheus came down from the heights of Olympus, past the rocks, past the still air, carrying the light, small, hidden, glowing softly in the fennel stalk he had chosen. He did not speak. He did not shout, because this moment was not loud. It was sacred. The fire he held was not only heat, not just a tool. It was hope, something the people had forgotten the shape of. When he reached them, the cold ones, the watchers of the stars, the hands that had learned to wait, he did not raise the flame high. He crouched beside them, opened his hands, and shared it. Quietly, gently, as if passing a secret from one heart to another. No grand words, no reward, only warmth, growing between palms, crackling in hushed wonder, reflected in wide eyes that didn't yet understand what they were seeing. They only knew one thing. The cold was gone, and light had come. And Prometheus. He did not stay to be thanked. He watched for a moment, then turned and walked back into the darkness. Because this gift, this fire, was not about him. It was about what it would become. In homes, in stories, in every meal cooked, every night survived. A gift shared quietly, like a whisper that becomes a song. Why is the giving of fire told like this? Softly, personally, as if it were sacred. Maybe because it was never just a flame. It was trust. It was belief. It was someone seeing the suffering of others and saying, I will help, even if no one knows I did. And maybe that's what makes a gift sacred. Not the size of it, but the heart behind it. And so, everything changed. At first, it was subtle, a flicker in the night, a glow where once there had only been shadow. But slowly, quietly, the fire Prometheus gave wove itself into the fabric of human life. Meat sizzled over glowing embers. What was once chewed raw and tough now softened with warmth. Stomachs calmed, energy grew, children grew stronger, minds sharpened. And then came the tools. Rocks hardened in fire, ore melted, metal was shaped, first into knives, then into hammers, then into things the gods had never imagined mortals could hold. Sparks were no longer rare. They were made by flint and will. Fire was no longer a mystery. It was a companion. Nights, once fearful and long, became moments of gathering. People drew close to the flame, not just for warmth, but for something deeper, a kind of peace, a place to speak, to share. Fireside stories began, whispers of the stars, tales of beasts and heroes, the beginnings of memory, the roots of myth. Fire became more than survival. It became identity, a place to belong. For the first time, humans weren't just existing. They were becoming something new. Not gods, not beasts, but something in between. Thinkers, makers, rememberers. And at the center of it all, a small flame, flickering softly, reminding them they were not alone. What was once a stolen spark soon became sacred. No longer just for cooking or keeping wolves at bay. Fire now held something deeper, a doorway, a presence. In the heart of every home, a hearth, a flame tended day and night, not allowed to die. It was more than heat. It was lineage. It was spirit. The hearth became a center, a place where families ate, prayed, told stories. Fire became memory. Fire became mother. And in temples, the flame was lifted higher. Altars glowed with offerings, grains, wine, bones. Smoke rising skyward was not just a smell, it was a message. To the gods above, it said, "We remember you, we fear you, we thank you." Sacrifice became ceremony. A goat's fat sizzling in the flame was not cruelty, it was covenant, a giving back of what had been given. Priests tended the flames with reverence, each spark lit with intention. No fire was casual anymore. It was shaped, named, prayed to. To extinguish a sacred flame was not just a mistake. It was an omen, a severing. And yet, in every relighting, there was renewal, a promise that this fragile link between man and God was still intact. The fire was no longer just a tool. It had become a bridge, between mortal and divine, between earth and sky, between the human and the eternal. It started small, a flicker in the dark, a warmth that pushed back the night. But from that flicker, a world changed. No longer did man huddle in caves, gnawing raw meat, waiting for the sun to rise. Now he shaped his world. With fire, he forged metal, tools, weapons, plows. He cleared forests, baked clay, melted ore. Villages formed around embers. Hearths brought neighbors close, and from those circles, laws were spoken, rituals born, songs remembered. With fire, man tamed food. Cooked grain became bread, meat became feast, hunger eased, time opened. Now he could plan, he could dream. Walls were raised, temples built, symbols etched into stone, language carved into clay. And above all, stories were told. Stories of gods, of monsters, of the firebringer who had made it all possible. It wasn't just warmth Prometheus had given them, not just light. He had given them time. He had given them voice. He had given them the spark to build, to imagine. And civilization, that slow rising tide, was the proof. Prometheus did not just give fire. He gave the idea of change. He gave man the chance to become more. And perhaps that, above all, is what made the gods afraid. Did Prometheus give more than fire? Perhaps he gave possibility itself. In the tiniest spark, he handed mankind a question. What will you do with this? And in the glowing silence of the flame, civilization answered, everything. After Prometheus gave man fire, he knew there would be consequences, but he did not know from where they would come. So he waited. And while he waits, Zeus's wrath stirred. From high atop Olympus, the skies darkened, not with clouds, but with judgment. Zeus, father of gods, lord of thunder, felt the insult burn deeper than the stolen flame. They dare rise above their place, he roared as he looked down at humans, using the very fire he had hidden. Prometheus, gifted with foresight, yet blind to Zeus's next move, could only feel a tremble in the air. Something ancient had awakened, not just vengeance, but a plan. It did not come with thunder. There was no storm, no bolt hurled from the heavens. Zeus's anger was colder than that. When the king of the gods discovered the theft, he did not shout. He did not strike. He simply watched. The mortals below laughed now. They sang by firelight. They warmed their children and shaped the world without fear. And above them, the one who had given them this gift, watched too. Prometheus, the titan of forethought, the planner, the quiet rebel. Zeus said nothing, but within him a decision hardened. This was not a god to be shouted at. This was a god who waited. His silence was not mercy. It was momentum. In Olympus, the other gods felt it, a weight in the air, a gathering tide. Zeus, after all, did not need rage. He was the law, the sky itself, inevitability in the shape of a man. And now, the balance had been upset. Prometheus had tilted the scales, lifting mortals too high, challenging the divine order set by the king himself. Zeus did not forget. Zeus did not forgive. He simply prepared, with calm, with precision. A punishment was coming, and it would not be swift. It would be eternal. No trial, no counsel, no plea. The order came from Olympus, and the skies obeyed. Prometheus, once free among stars and mortals alike, was seized, not with violence, not with a god's fury, but with the cold grip of judgment. He didn't resist. He had seen this coming. Forethought always did. From high upon the clouds, the Titan was taken. beyond the known lands of men, beyond river and ruin, to the very edge of the world. The Caucasus Mountains. A jagged spine of stone where the wind screams louder than birds, and even silence is sharp. It was not just exile, it was symbolism. This was where the world cracked, where heaven seemed furthest from earth, where a god might disappear into suffering and no echo would return. There, against a pillar of unyielding rock, Prometheus was bound, not with ropes, not with chains of bronze, but with shackles forged by Hephaestus himself, god of the forge, son of Hera, a craftsman forced to play executioner. And so, iron met divine skin. The mountain took him, and the skies watched. There was no cave to shield him, no shade from the sun, no fire, ironic now, to warm his limbs. Prometheus was chained to the face of the mountain, arms stretched wide, wrists locked in divine iron. A crucifixion of a different kind. No blood, no cries, just wind. Wind that howled across the stone, dry and merciless. Sun that burned his skin raw by day, cold that gnawed at him by night. Rain, snow, time itself, and silence. The gods did not come. No messenger, no judgment, only the punishment. Every morning, with the rising sun, a shadow passed across the peaks, wings beating slow and heavy. The eagle, a monstrous thing sacred to Zeus, not a creature of the earth but of divine intent. It landed on Prometheus's chest, clawed into him, and fed. It tore into his side, finding the liver, a symbol of regeneration, of life itself. He did not scream, not after the first day, not after the first decade. He endured. At night, as the stars emerged, his body healed. Bone knitted, tissue reformed, the organ grew back. The cycle was cruelly perfect. A torment designed not just to punish, but to last. For Prometheus was immortal, and so was his sentence. Day after day, the eagle returns. Its talons dig deep, its beak sinks without mercy. Its hunger, never satisfied. And still, Prometheus does not scream. The wind howls louder than any cry ever could. The stone beneath him shakes in storm and frost, but his voice, silent. Not out of pride, not defiance alone, but purpose. To cry out would be to ask for relief, and he asked for none. He had made a choice, not a mistake, not a rebellion for power, but an act born from love. Love for the fragile creatures who walked below, shivering in darkness, scraping through winters with nothing but hope and each other. He remembered them, their hands reaching for warmth, their eyes wide with wonder at the flame, their stories beginning around the firelight he had given. And though his body was torn, again and again, his will did not break. There was pain, but no regret. There was silence, but no surrender. He endures, because some things, some gifts, are worth the cost, even if that cost is eternity. What is eternal punishment to someone who disobeyed out of compassion? To someone who broke divine law, not for pride, not for rebellion, but for kindness? Prometheus did not cry out, because he had already spoken. He had spoken through fire, through warmth, through light, and in that silence on the mountain, the world below still remembered him, not as a traitor to Olympus, but as the friend of man. Prometheus was chained and eaten alive every day by Zeus's eagle. But why such a cruel punishment? Why the liver? Why not the heart, the eyes, the bones? Why would the gods choose that organ, deep within the body, soft and hidden, to be the target of daily agony? Because the liver regenerates. It heals. It grows back, even after being torn apart. The ancients knew this. They may not have known the science, but they observed the body's quiet miracles. And in Prometheus's suffering, the liver became more than flesh. It became a message, a symbol, not of destruction, but of resilience. Each day the eagle devours it. Each night it returns. And in that endless cycle, there is a truth whispered by the myth itself, that some acts of love, some defiant gifts, cannot be destroyed, not by punishment, not by gods, not by time. Prometheus's body breaks, but it repairs. His pain repeats, but so does his strength. The liver is not just what he loses, it's what he keeps. The will to endure. The refusal to give Zeus the satisfaction of defeat. The quiet regeneration of spirit beneath chains and eagle's talons. He doesn't die, because the meaning of his suffering is to live through it, to be the eternal symbol of sacrifice, of patience, of endurance, for something greater than himself. It does not speak. It does not reason. It does not show mercy. The eagle, Zeus's creature, his sentinel of power, majestic, unrelenting, divine. But when it descends upon Prometheus, it is not noble. It is not wise. It is brutal. Each beat of its wings carries Olympus's judgment. Each slash of its talon says, obey, submit, regret. The eagle is no mere bird of prey. It is domination with feathers, punishment with a beak. It was once a symbol of the skies, of kingship, of clarity, of godly rule. But chained to the mountain, its shadow no longer inspires awe. It inspires dread. Zeus chose it for a reason. The same way a throne is raised high, or lightning is hurled down. The eagle reminds all who watch, this is divine control. And it reaches everywhere. Even the Titan who gave fire cannot escape it. Even Prometheus, once proud and tall, must face it, daily, as the sky itself tears into him. But the myth whispers something beneath the cruelty, that even the eagle, powerful and relentless, cannot end what Prometheus began. It can consume, it can dominate, but it cannot unwrite the gift of fire. It cannot undo the light passed to mankind. So the eagle circles, again and again, a divine reminder that Zeus still reigns. Yet each descent is proof that Prometheus still resists. Where Prometheus was punished wasn't a cave. It is not a cliff, not a slope, not a place one stumbles upon. It is the rock, singular, chosen, endless. Prometheus is bound not in a prison cell, but on a monument, one that touches the sky, one carved by time, and now by punishment. This rock is exile. No voice echoes back. No wind carries comfort. No god or mortal walks nearby. Only cold, only height, only stillness. But that's only half its nature, because the rock is not just isolation. It is endurance. No flood can wear it away. No fire can crack it. It stays, as Prometheus does. The rock becomes a paradox. It is punishment and protection. It silences him, but it preserves him. He is chained, but not erased, suffering, but not perishing. And in that quiet suffering, the rock becomes a kind of altar, not to Zeus, but to defiance, to the unbreakable will of one who gave, and who now waits. a titan immortal, pinned to a place no storm can reach, not because the world forgot him, but because the gods could not. Prometheus is more than a titan bound by chains. He is the first of a long line, the first suffering hero. He made a choice, not because it was easy, not because it brought comfort, but because it was right. He put his own safety aside. He accepted pain and loneliness. He faced endless hardship, all for the sake of others, for the sake of humankind. This is the story of a being who could not turn away, who could not ignore the quiet call of compassion. Some say he is a martyr, a soul who bears suffering for a greater cause. Others say he simply could not do otherwise, that his nature compelled him to act. Either way, Prometheus stands as a symbol of courage without glory, of love without reward, of principle above fear. And in that quiet choice, there is something eternal, something human. He is the first light in the darkness, not just because he gave fire, but because he showed what it means to choose the right path, even when it leads to chains. Is Prometheus a martyr, or simply a being who could not do otherwise? Perhaps in his story, we find the beginnings of our own understanding, that some choices shape not just a life, but the very meaning of being human. After all this, mankind evolved with the fire. There was no thunder, no sudden flash, no fanfare when it happened, but something had changed. A glow in the night, a warmth in the windless dark, a flicker, small at first, but it never went out. Fire. It had returned, and with it, so did hope. At first, they used it just to stay alive, to cook their food, to ward off beasts, to survive cold nights. But then, they began to build. Not just homes, but ideas. Flames turned caves into dwellings. Flames forged tools stronger than stone. Flames shaped metal, softened it, bent it, sharpened it. And in those orange-lit circles, they told stories, shared dreams, taught their children. Fire wasn't just a thing. It became a companion, a teacher, a mirror of their own spirit, capable of both creation and destruction. They learned how to store it, carry it, protect it, how to shape clay, cure wounds, harden weapons, and slowly, across centuries, villages became towns, towns became cities, and cities dreamed of empires. It all began with that one act, that one gift. And whether they knew it or not, every spark lit after that night was a quiet echo of Prometheus, a reminder that they had been chosen, entrusted, empowered. Mankind no longer merely lived. Now they grew. Now they dreamed. And they would never forget the fire. Not really. Not in their bones. Not in their myths. Not in the stories told beside hearths, where shadows dance and voices whisper. Once, long ago, someone stole fire for us. Progress is never free. Every step forward leaves a shadow. Every spark comes from something, or someone, who burned. Prometheus was the first, chained for the fire we still carry. But he was not the last. Across the centuries, others would follow. Not gods this time, but people. Those who stood against the dark, even when it cost them everything. An ancestor who lit the first lamp in a cave, even as wild beasts circled outside. A nameless woman who learned how to cook with flame, turning roots into meals, and hunger into strength. A blacksmith who cut his hands to shape iron into tools, so his people could plant, defend, build. A teacher who shared forbidden truths by firelight. A mother who gave warmth to her child and none to herself. A visionary who saw a better world and was silenced for daring to dream aloud. Again and again the pattern repeats. Someone suffers, so others might rise. And what do we do with their pain? We inherit it. We live because of it. We carry it forward. In every invention, every act of kindness, every moment where we choose light over darkness. This is the quiet law of legacy, not carved into stone, but whispered through time. Your comfort was paid for by those who came before, by those who could not rest, by those who endured so you might thrive. We owe them more than memory. We owe them meaning. Not guilt, not shame, but purpose. To live not just for ourselves, but for the fire bearers, the silent ones, the chained ones, the ones who could not stop, even if it broke them. Prometheus did not vanish. Though the gods punished him, though the eagle tore at him, he did not fade into silence. Instead, he became louder, not with words, but with meaning. The Greeks wrote him into tragedy. Aeschylus, the great playwright, gave him voice in chains. Prometheus bound, a cry from the cliffside, a drama where defiance burns brighter than lightning. In it, Prometheus does not beg, he resists. Even when the gods roar, even when the world forgets. Centuries passed, and still the flame flickered. During the Renaissance, artists painted him, nude, bound, defiant, the fire in his eyes untouched, even as the eagle loomed. And then came the Romantics. In an age of revolution and rebellion, they saw something different, something deeper. To them, Prometheus was not just myth. He was a symbol, a champion of the human spirit, a martyr for knowledge, a mirror of man's own struggles against tyrants, systems, gods. And among them stood one voice, clear and radical. Percy Bysshe Shelley. In Prometheus Unbound, Shelley rewrote the ending. There, Prometheus is not destroyed, but triumphant. Zeus falls, and the chained rebel becomes a herald of hope. No more punishment, no more silence. Shelley's Prometheus is not just fire giver, but freedom bringer. It was not a retelling, it was a reinvention. Because that's what Prometheus always becomes, what every age needs him to be. A light in darkness, a voice for the voiceless, a reminder that even gods can be wrong, and even mortals can be right. Art remembers what history tries to bury, and in paint, in poetry, in performance, Prometheus lives on. Still bound, still burning, still ours. Prometheus gave us fire, but with it came no manual, no promise that we would use it well, only the raw spark and the weight of choice. At first, fire was a quiet blessing, a flicker in the dark, a whisper of heat in cold places. It dried our clothes, boiled our water, cooked our meals. It gathered us around its glow, not just for survival, but for stories, songs, and beginnings. Villages became towns, towns became cities, and at the center, always, fire. But fire does not care why it burns. It simply obeys. And humanity, clever and restless, learned to shape it, to forge metal, to mold tools, to make weapons. Soon the same flame that baked bread was smelting swords. The same heat that gave life was setting cities ablaze. We raised torches not only to light paths, but to lead armies, to destroy libraries, to punish, to conquer. And so, fire became more than a gift. It became a mirror of our hunger, of our courage, of our cruelty. It warmed hands and lit battlefields. It healed and it scarred. Maybe that was the truth all along. Prometheus didn't just give us fire. He gave us responsibility. He trusted us with power. And with it came a silent question. What will you do with this? What do we do with the gifts we've been given? The ones bought through pain, through sacrifice, through someone else's suffering. Prometheus paid with chains, and we inherited the flame. And still today, in the quiet moment before striking a match, before flipping a switch, before choosing words that can heal or destroy, the question still lingers. Will we use what we've been given to build or to burn? That is the true legacy. And that is still being written. There's a part of the myth, a lesser-known thread, tucked into the folds of ancient memory, that Prometheus knew something, not just about fire, but about the future. You see, some say that as Prometheus hung in silence, his body torn each day by Zeus's eagle, his mind held onto a secret that even Zeus feared, a prophecy. But one day, Zeus, king of the gods, would fall, and the one who would cause it would be born of Zeus himself, a child, a son, a power greater than the father who ruled Olympus. Prometheus knew who the mother would be, a sea goddess, Thetis, and he knew that if Zeus took her for himself, the child would be his undoing. And so Prometheus stayed silent, not out of spite, not out of vengeance, but because knowledge was power, and he wielded it, even while bound. Zeus, for all his thunder, could not pry the truth from him. This time, the Titan held something stronger than fire, a choice. He would not speak unless he was freed. In some versions, it's this secret, not fire, that truly chained Prometheus. The one card he kept close even as centuries passed and his pain endured. And in the end, it worked. Zeus, the all-powerful, was forced to bend. Prometheus was eventually unchained, not because of pity, but because even gods must reckon with fate. Prometheus had endured, and with his silence, he'd shaped the future of Olympus itself. Because sometimes, resistance isn't loud. Sometimes it is quiet, steady, enduring. And sometimes, the one who suffers is also the one who holds the keys to what comes next. The chains were not just metal. They were memory, punishment, warning. Every clink of the links that bound Prometheus to the cliffside was a reminder of what he had done and what he would not do. Zeus wanted fire returned? Too late. Zeus wanted loyalty? Too late. And now, Zeus wanted a secret. The one secret that could tip Olympus on its head. The one prophecy that whispered of his own end. Prometheus had it, and he would not give it. Not to beg, not to bargain. Even as the eagle came, day after day, with wings spread wide and talons eager, he said nothing. Even as his insides were ripped, his pain renewed, his silence stretched across time like a shield, he said nothing. Because Prometheus understood something even the gods struggled with, that sometimes the only thing we truly own is our refusal. And so he clung to it, not out of spite, but out of principle, out of something deeper than pride, something that could not be broken by pain or beaten by fear. Even in his suffering, he kept that knowledge like an ember under ash, alive, protected, burning quietly. He would not speak it, not to please, not to survive, Because some truths are too powerful to be given away freely, and some chains, even divine ones, cannot break the will of a soul that chooses silence with purpose. For ages, the world moved on while Prometheus stayed still. He watched empires rise. He watched men build towers and cities, fueled by the fire he had given them. He watched the stars wheel overhead, but could never reach them. He was not forgotten, but he was alone. Then, one day, footsteps echoed on the craggy ledge. Not divine thunder, not Zeus, but a man, strong, wild, and mortal, yet touched by destiny. Heracles, son of Zeus, bearer of labors, breaker of monsters. He came not for glory, not for gain, but because it was right. He saw the chains. He saw the wound that never healed. He saw the eagle still circling. And with a bow in his hand and justice in his heart, he took aim and struck. The eagle fell. Its shadow vanished from the rocks. And then, with hands that had once held up the sky, Heracles broke the bonds. Iron shattered, stone cracked, and Prometheus stood. After so long, after so much pain, he was free. Not because Zeus forgave him, not because the punishment was done, but because even gods must bend to fate. And fate had decided this story would not end in silence and agony, not for a being who gave light to the world. Heracles, a mortal with divine blood, had become the bridge between Olympus and earth, between punishment and mercy. And in that moment, the myth turned, from tragedy to triumph. Not with a roar, not with thunder, but with one man lifting another from the rocks. There was no thunder, no proclamation from the skies, no bolt of rage to strike down Heracles or Prometheus. There was only silence. But in that silence, permission. Zeus allowed it. The chains were gone. The eagle was dead. And Prometheus, scarred but standing, was no longer a prisoner. It wasn't a surrender. It wasn't Zeus admitting defeat. He was still king of Olympus, still the wielder of lightning, the keeper of law. But perhaps, somewhere deep in the cloud-wrapped heights of his throne, he remembered something. A time before thrones, before rebellion, before punishment, when Prometheus had once been his ally, when they had shaped the cosmos together, light and order, form and fire. Maybe Zeus remembered that Prometheus had acted not out of defiance alone, but out of belief. Belief in the humans, those fragile, stubborn creatures who now carried the flame. And maybe, just maybe, the king of gods, in all his power, saw the weight of the years and decided to let the story change. No decree, no song of pardon, just a quiet end to a very long silence. And so, Prometheus was free. Not restored to Olympus, not crowned with laurels, but allowed to walk again, to breathe again, to exist beyond punishment. A quiet act, but one that spoke loudly. Because even the fiercest justice can make room for mercy. The story of Prometheus did not end with chains broken or eagles silenced. It did not vanish with ancient gods or forgotten temples. No, it echoes still. In every spark of creativity, in every bold stroke of art, in every question asked beyond the known. The artist, the scientist, the rebel, all walk in his shadow. They carry the fire forward, not just the fire of flame, but the fire of vision, the fire of will, the fire of hope. Because Prometheus reminds us, once knowledge is given, once the spark has been lit, it cannot be taken back. It spreads, it grows, it changes the world. That flame burns in laboratories where new truths are born, in studios where new worlds take shape, in protests where voices demand change. The myth lives because fire is never just fire. It is power, it is light, it is life. And as long as there are those who dare to carry it, the fire will never go out. And now, as the last ember fades and the story settles into quiet, we hope this tale of fire, courage, and timeless echoes brought you peace tonight. May your dreams be warm with wonder, and may you wake with a little more light inside you. If you enjoyed this story and you'd like to hear more myths and bedtime journeys like this, gently hold night after night, please consider subscribing. We'd love to keep you company and help you drift off, one myth at a time. Good night. Sleep well, and let the fire burn on, soft.